The day my parents threw me away like garbage. The suitcase hit the front porch with a thud that echoed through my chest like a heart attack. My mother stood in the doorway, her face stone cold, holding my childhood teddy bear by one arm like evidence in a courtroom. "You have 30 minutes to get off our property," she said, her voice steady as a judge delivering a life sentence. "And don't you dare come back." I was 23 years old, standing on the porch of the house where I'd taken my first steps, learned to ride a bike, celebrated every birthday, and I had absolutely no idea what I'd done wrong. You know that feeling when the ground just disappears beneath your feet? When everything you thought was solid suddenly turns out to be quicksand? That's exactly what happened to me on that Tuesday morning in March. I'd driven home from my apartment to pick up some old photo albums for a scrapbook I was making for my girlfriend's birthday. Just a normal day. Just a normal visit to see my parents. But the moment I walked through that front door, I knew something was different. The house felt cold. Not temperature cold, but emotionally frozen. My father was sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him, wearing his reading glasses and that expression he got when he was doing taxes. Serious. Calculating. My mother was standing behind him with her arms crossed, and when she looked at me, her eyes were different. They were the eyes of someone looking at a stranger. "Sit down," my father said without looking up from his papers. His voice had that tone he used to use when I was in trouble as a kid, but this was different. This was final. I sat down across from them, my hands already starting to shake even though I didn't know why. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, trying to pretend everything was normal. That's when my father looked up at me and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Disgust. Pure, undiluted disgust, like I was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. "We know what you did," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table toward me. "We know everything." I opened the folder with trembling fingers and my heart stopped. Inside were printouts of text messages, bank statements, receipts, and photos. Photos I'd never seen before. Photos that looked like me but weren't me. Photos that had been digitally altered so perfectly that even I had to look twice to spot the manipulation. Someone had created an entire false identity using my face, my name, my personal information. They'd opened credit cards in my name, taken out loans, even created social media profiles where I was supposedly involved in things that would have made my conservative parents' hair stand on end. The person who did this had crafted a narrative so convincing, so detailed, that it looked like I'd been living a double life for years. "This isn't me," I whispered, flipping through page after page of evidence that painted me as someone I'd never been. "Mom, Dad, this isn't me. Someone's using my identity. This is fraud." My mother laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter, sharp, like broken glass. "Oh, so now you're going to lie to our faces? We raised you better than this." "I'm not lying." I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Look at this stuff. Look at the dates. Half of these things supposedly happened when I was with you guys. Remember Christmas last year? I was here for 3 days straight. But according to this, I held up a bank statement I was supposedly in Vegas spending thousands of dollars on things I would never spend money on. But they weren't listening. I could see it in their faces. They'd made up their minds before I even walked through the door. This wasn't a conversation or a chance to explain myself. This was a trial where the verdict had already been decided. My father stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. "Your mother and I have been married for 31 years. We've built a reputation in this community. I'm an elder at our church. Your mother volunteers at the hospital. We cannot and will not have our family name dragged through the mud because of your choices." "What choices?" I was practically screaming now. "I haven't made any choices. This isn't real." That's when my mother pulled out her phone and showed me a video. A video that made my blood run cold. It was security footage from what looked like a convenience store, and there I was, or someone who looked exactly like me, doing something that would have gotten me arrested if it were real. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. The person in that video moved like me, talked like me, even had the same nervous habit of running their hand through their hair when they were anxious. Someone had studied me so carefully, so thoroughly, that they could impersonate not just my appearance but my mannerisms. "We got a call from the police last week," my father said, still facing the window. "They wanted to ask you some questions about activities in several states. Activities that match your credit card records and social media posts." I felt like I was drowning. "Did you tell them I was being impersonated? Did you show them evidence that this isn't me?" My mother's expression softened for just a moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe me. But then she hardened again like a door slamming shut. "We can't take that chance," she said quietly. "We can't risk our reputation, our standing in the community, our everything. on the possibility that you're telling the truth. And that's when it hit me. They weren't throwing me out because they believed I was guilty. They were throwing me out because they couldn't afford to risk being wrong about my innocence. Think about that for a second. Your own parents would rather lose you forever than risk being associated with scandal. They'd rather believe their child was capable of terrible things than face the possibility of standing by someone who might be innocent. The next 20 minutes were a blur of accusations, tears, and the sound of my belongings being thrown into garbage bags. My childhood room was dismantled like a crime scene, every poster taken down, every trophy packed away, every trace of me erased as if I'd never existed. But the worst part wasn't the packing. The worst part was the silence. My parents didn't yell. They didn't cry. They didn't even seem angry anymore. They worked with the efficiency of people disposing of unwanted furniture, methodical and emotionless. I was being deleted from their lives with the same energy they'd used to clean out a closet. As I stood on that porch with everything I owned stuffed into mismatched suitcases and trash bags, I realized something that changed me forever. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had just demonstrated that their love came with terms and conditions I'd never known existed. But here's where the story takes a turn that even I didn't see coming. 3 weeks later, living in a studio apartment that smelled like cigarettes and defeat, working double shifts at a diner to pay rent I could barely afford, I got a phone call that changed everything. Is this? The voice on the other end hesitated. Is this the real you? It was a detective from the cyber crimes unit. They'd been investigating a massive identity theft ring that had been operating for over 2 years, using sophisticated deepfake technology and social engineering to destroy dozens of lives. And I wasn't just a victim. I was the key to bringing down the entire operation. The person who'd stolen my identity? It was someone I trusted. Someone who'd had access to my personal information, my habits, my family dynamics. Someone who knew exactly which buttons to push to make my parents doubt me. It was my cousin Derek. Derek, who'd lived with us for 6 months after his parents divorced. Derek, who'd shared my room, borrowed my clothes, learned my mannerisms. Derek, who'd been like a brother to me, who I defended when other family members called him trouble. Derek, who'd been running a sophisticated scam operation using the identities of family members and close friends, knowing that we'd be the least likely to suspect him and the most likely to protect him if anyone got too close to the truth. The investigation revealed that he'd been using my identity to fund a lifestyle that included luxury cars, expensive apartments, and a gambling addiction that had spiraled completely out of control. When the debts got too high and the creditors started closing in, he needed a way out. So he created a situation where I would be blamed for everything, discredited and abandoned by the people who might have helped clear my name. He counted on my parents' pride and their fear of scandal to do his work for him. And it had worked perfectly. The day the police arrested Derek, I called my parents. I thought they'd want to know that their nephew had been destroying our family from the inside out. I thought they'd want to apologize, to make things right, to welcome me back home. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. "We saw the news," she said before I could even speak. Her voice was quiet, defeated. "We know what Derek did. We know we were wrong." I waited for the apology. I waited for her to ask me to come home. I waited for her to say she was sorry for choosing their reputation over their child. Instead, she said, "But we can't take back what we said. We can't undo what we did. Too much has happened. Too much has been said." And that's when I realized something that hurt worse than being thrown out in the first place. My parents weren't just afraid of scandal. They were afraid of admitting they were wrong. They were afraid of facing the fact that they'd abandoned their child based on lies. They were afraid of the guilt, the shame, the reality that they'd failed the most basic test of parenthood. It was easier to lose me forever than to face what they'd done. So I hung up the phone and never called them again. That was 5 years ago. I rebuilt my life from nothing, learned to trust my own judgment again, found people who love me without conditions or escape clauses. I'm engaged to an amazing woman who stood by me through the darkest period of my life, and we're planning a wedding that my parents will never attend. Derek was sentenced to 7 years for identity theft, fraud, and cyber harassment. He's in minimum security prison now, probably telling his cellmates that he was framed, that he's the real victim in all of this. My parents still live in the same house, still go to the same church, still maintain the same reputation they were so desperate to protect. But I heard through the family grapevine that they've aged 10 years in the past 5. They've become quiet, withdrawn, shadows of the people they used to be. Sometimes I wonder if they think about me. If they regret choosing their image over their child. If they realize that the scandal they were so afraid of never materialized, but they lost their son anyway. But here's what I've learned from all of this. Family isn't just about blood or shared DNA or growing up in the same house. Family is about showing up when things get hard. It's about believing in each other when the world doesn't make sense. It's about choosing love over fear, truth over comfort, and the people you care about over what other people might think. My parents failed that test. But I didn't. And that's made all the difference. The people who matter most in my life now are the ones who saw me at my lowest point and decided to stick around anyway. They're the ones who helped me rebuild not just my credit score and my reputation, but my faith in human nature. And you know what? I'm grateful it happened. Because it showed me who I really am when everything gets stripped away. It showed me what I'm capable of surviving. And it showed me the difference between people who love you and people who love the idea of you. If you're listening to this and you've been rejected by people who were supposed to protect you, if you've been abandoned by people who claim to love you unconditionally, I want you to know something. Their failure to see your worth doesn't diminish your value. Their inability to stand by you doesn't make you unworthy of love. Sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your story in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories from real people.